Hello, Shadow Control is on the air, and today we are visiting Magician Vladimir. Vladimir, Black Poppy, Pest, Terralog. Hello, Vladimir.
Good time to you. Please tell us about your practice. My name is Vladimir. I am a practicing poppy, Veretnik, tarologist. Could you tell us in more detail how you started to engage in the activities that have come now? How did it start? Yes, it was in the year 2006. Until the year 2006, I adhered to certain such purely atheistic views and proceeded from the concept. That is, until I see it, don't believe it. In the 2006 year, fate brought me an article by a man who was engaged in ritual magic, ritual techniques, and, of course, the layout of the tarot deck. In general, for my part, I saw, believed, and, of course, I have already mastered this craft in the future. It's interesting to know, but what did you see? What exactly was the impetus to do this? Well, first of all, it is an accurate diagnosis on the layout of the tarot deck, a complete diagnosis of situations. And, of course, the effectiveness of ritual practices.
It turns out that you have started to conduct these rituals for yourself.
When I approached it from the side that it really takes place, of course, it looked like the following way. That I was convinced of this effectiveness. Why did I start studying, of course? In other words, I understood how this concept works, how interaction occurs. After that, 2 years later, having seen the effectiveness, I already realized that I could conduct rituals exclusively. Not only for myself, but also for someone.
Tell us in more detail, maybe, about how your training took place. That is, what kind of mentoring it is, how it happens. That is, how did you choose a mentor? That is there such a possibility in choosing at all?
You know, in this case, it is worth noting that, probably, I did not choose this path, but the path and this craft, of course, chose me. My mentor, of course, led the practice exactly in the same way that I lead, of course, I learned from him. This, of course, was the path of Russian black magic, Veretnichestvo, namely cathedral witchcraft. But it is interesting to reveal in more detail the concept of cathedral witchcraft. That is, it's something. How can this be deciphered? Cathedral witchcraft. This is a very specific practice. Lately, however, the only thing is that it has become a certain, if I may say so, hype. That is, earlier it did not have such popularity, did not have such distribution, then again now. In contrast, if we take the examples of crossroads magic, yes, then yes, there is such a technique as crossroads magic. That is, the intersection is a place of power. Then of course the lowest entities live at the intersection, yes, that is, larvae, trailers, bindings, yes, again. Well, that is, low-ranking entities. If we take cemetery magic, cemetery craft, then there is just the same work going on with the spirits of places, yes. With restless souls. This, of course, is all that is specifically cemetery work. Just the same cathedral magic and cathedral witchcraft. It is she who is specific in that there is work with demons going on here, that is, it is work with the demonic pantheon that is going on. And in general, if we take a comparison, Western European Satanism is, of course, demonology. That is, if they have it happening in the key of demonology, we have it happening not only in cathedral witchcraft. That is, in this case, the cathedral is a place of power. The cathedral, and is meant as a cathedral building. Of course. This itself, the cathedral itself, is a place of power, that is, of course, a certain energy is concentrated there. It is impossible to say first of all what kind of energy it has, plus or minus, right? That is, in fact, it is neutral, right? It has both a plus and a certain minus, yes, that is, someone comes there with something positive. Someone brings something negative there. Yes, the negative also takes place there. I think it's not a secret for the layman, yes, that is, a person who is doing well, he goes there extremely rarely. But it is to put a candle in the memory of the soul, to order a funeral service, yes. As if to ask for the healing of a particular disease. This is, well, mostly it is minus energy, yes. If you take there again the rites of baptism or wedding ceremonies. Did I understand correctly? From your words it turns out that you work with demons. Without Umma? This is working with demons, of course. And you also mentioned a certain hierarchy, that is, lower entities. Yes, the lowest order. She certainly has her essence too. In general, of course. And if we take, well, summarize all the entities, right? Well, the invisible world, let's call it that, yes, that is, cross magic, yes, it works. Cemetery and cathedral. There is also some kind of hierarchy between these categories, right? You know, here, first of all, every master, of course, or a practicing specialist, he chooses for himself what is closer to him. Right. That is, at one time, back in the 2006 year, I also had an undertaking in cemetery magic. But I summarized for myself that this, of course, is not mine. Cathedral witchcraft is closer to me. How did you figure that out? For comfort. In other words, it can be comfortable to work with something, more comfortable with something, less comfortable with something. That is, every master, every specialist, every esoteric, that is, the same tarologist, let's say, who chooses for himself. Let's say there is one deck of cards, yes, and works only with it. Why? Because, of course, he is comfortable working with her. Again, it is effective, it is informative, he seems to like it, yes, it is the atmosphere itself again, the same energy. That is, if you take techniques, there are a lot of techniques. The same voodoo technique, by and large, it is the same side as our cemetery magic. That is, yes, that is, everything that rituals are carried out in the cemetery and, accordingly, the voodoo cult Baron Samedi is the same owner of the cemetery with us. In other words, these are purely cultural aspects. Of course, any ritual craft, first of all, has an identity of a national character, yes, that is, what exactly carries a certain cultural aspect. Russian witchcraft is the same, of course, Russian witchcraft, it is also formed with a certain set of identity, right? That is, if we take in general, by and large, the path of Veritnichestvo, this is the very first magical craft that appeared. In other words, it is embedded in any culture. There was when, of course, we had paganism before the baptism of Russia, that is, of course, pagans also bowed to Vels. And someone Maria Chernobyl, yes, again. That is, someone went to the light ones, someone went to the dark ones. There was a baptism, of course, of those who accepted it, without wanting a certain opposition. They, of course, have already started working in this very same Gregor, and, of course, which they accepted. But already in the cult of Veretnichestvo. And of course, when it was the 16th century, and Patriarch Nikon removed a number of icons from cathedrals, which, according to his vision, should not have been in cathedrals, yes, that is, icons were displayed in squares. Icons, respectively, were blasphemed. And at that moment, it was precisely the cult of Veretnichestvo, the cult of cathedral witchcraft, that he began to acquire such another, I would say, stage of development. That is, what was previously condemned, yes, and punished in every possible way by the Inquisition of the same, yes. But this is again the Inquisition in Western European countries. In our case, it was again the department of the Patriarchate that dealt with this, yes, that is. Apparently they burned not only in Europe, of course, but certainly, of course, here when their hands were already untied. It was with impunity. Since some icons can be blasphemed, it means that others can also be blasphemed. In other words, there was exactly such a surge here, and, of course, a certain strength of the transfer of ethnicity gained, precisely during the period of Patriarch Nikon.
I have another question like this. Maybe we'll go back there a little bit, right? But you said that in the year 2006, you found a mentor, that is,
I met him absolutely by accident. Yes.
by chance, but it was some kind of internal, I don't know, internal search or the same.
No. I was absolutely asked to tell fortunes on the tarot deck. In general, I said that it was probably from the category of psychiatry. I'm kind of ready for this, but, rubbing my hands, I said, well, show me tricks, I'll definitely look. If I have to. Yes, I was a clear skeptic. I clearly said that as if everyone is doing what he wants to do, but I adhere to the opinion. That is, until I see it with my eyes, I won't believe it.
Anyone can do magic, that is, be in your place. Or do you still need, I don't know, connections there? That's how it's written on your website, right? That is, it is generic.
Well, look, first of all, the predisposition is transmitted to the breed. That is, in general, I always knew that my father's great-great-grandfather was a male, yes, who, in general, was engaged in spiritualism at that moment in St. Petersburg. In principle, first of all, there are two components. Of course, a generic predisposition, and plus, of course, a generic predisposition is not enough. In other words, it is necessary that there should be at least an introductory course of study, and after only this course of study, a person begins to practice for himself, and only if he makes some progress, he already begins to practice for others.
It turns out some kind, permission.
It is correct to say a contract. That is. But then again, the same contract happens during the dedication, that is, the dedication, right? And, of course, it is worth noting that this dedication is very small. In other words, the master himself must develop this energy connection with the egregore with which he interacts, regardless of what it will be. That is, if it is cemetery magic, then it is, of course, a connection with the egregore of the dead earth, of course, yes. The restless spirits of places. If this is, of course, cathedral witchcraft, then, of course, it is, of course, a connection with demons.
In other words, some kind of confirmation from demons is needed here.
This confirmation will come from the effectiveness of the rituals.
You just said about the contract. That is, and in fact, you conclude a contract, that is, a kind of deal for the outside world.
And holy is the dedication, of course. This is a deal with the underworld.
What does this entail? There may be some. Well, that is, you have certain ones.
Conditions.
Terms of the deal, yes. That is, what you can do in the worldly life, what you can't. In other words, are there any restrictions, requirements?
First of all, it should be noted here, of course, and it should be noted that, at least in cathedral witchcraft, it should be a conscious choice, because after making this choice, there will be no turning back. That is, a person will be engaged exclusively in this. And even if you want to change a niche, yes, let's say there or a field of activity, then certainly a combination of circumstances will return him exactly to this. It turns out like a karmic lesson. That is, until you recycle it, and it is impossible to recycle it. In other words, this is the path already chosen, which will already lead the whole, as it were, the rest of your life, right? But I can say that I have no regrets. I am quite satisfied with my craft. I like to do what I do. And in general, this is really, perhaps, the case when it is not the master who chooses the craft, but the craft chooses the master. And at the same time, you are talking about an informed choice. That is, after all, you make this choice or not. In this case, you are given the opportunity, yes. That is, to open certain horizons, or to tread on the spot. And here, of course, a person faces, yes, this is the solution. Either he opens up these horizons, or he is marking time. Of course, as a seeker, I decided to open these horizons after all. It would be interesting to know if it is possible for a magician-sorcerer to leave witchcraft, or if he only has the opportunity to change direction. There is no way to leave at all. That is, since the 2008 year, as I have already begun to criticize, not only for myself, but also for someone. Yes, of course. In other words, I was working somewhere, engaged in some kind of activity, at the same time I was practicing. Yes, that is, accordingly, it was the 2017 year, when I was probably one of the last of the lazy ones to create my website, and, of course, I have already gone into this craft entirely. In other words, I have already realized for myself that I am quite satisfied with my activity. It is effective. I have already come to the point that I have such a large number of applicants, yes, that I have to make a choice entirely, either do this, or do something else. And to do something else, just fate leaves no choice, of course. Tell me, what do people come with? Well, as a rule, 70%, 80%, of course this is love magic. It's not a secret, it's obvious in my opinion. There were even sociologists conducting an experiment somewhere. Yes, of course, this is love magic, this is everything that is connected with relationships. That is, in fact, that love magic, that the magic of money is, of course, the lowest vibrations. In other words, there are no white coup. It's worth remembering, right? In other words, everything related to love magic, everything related to the magic of money, is, of course, ritual black magic. By the way, it's interesting, you mentioned black and white before, yes, about those who help, that is, white forces. Light and dark. Here is the practice of cathedral magic. This. What kind of power? Cathedral witchcraft. Well, look, in this case, the cathedral is a place of power, of course, yes, but again, everyone comes there for their own, that is. So there are blacks there too. And negative energy too. Well, you know, as Chandler Love once said to Anton, only a fool will believe in absolute good or absolute evil. And I work for the antipode. In other words, the antipode is the reverse side. That is, let's assume that the holy faces are accepted in Christianity. Of course, there are also black faces in Veretnichestvo. Moreover, they are so identical from the inside out that even their days of worship coincide with Christian ones. Well, let's assume where Christians honor Saint Nicholas. Yes, in the book, it is certainly a church without dogs. And he is revered precisely on the same days in which Saint Nicholas is revered among Christians. In other words, this is the reverse side, the antipode.
I would just like to know maybe more of some technical points. How do you do it? How do you work with a person, due to which one or another result is achieved?
Well, look, first of all, the work goes the following way. That is, of course, this is an actual job. It is worth noting here that the ritual has a very big difference from the rite. That is, in general, in a religious cult, magic is ubiquitous, it is constant. Of course, if you come to church and order a rite of baptism, yes, again, this is a rite, of course. That is, in this case, the church is a certain place of power. The same master is the same priest. Of course, ritual magic looks a little different. That is, of course, you understand, yes, no one will lead a husband or wife on a rope with a question, please enchant. Of course, it looks like the following way that, of course, this photo is used, and the photos are the most recent. But ideally, again in the reference, this is, of course, some kind of energy binding. This is either a lock of hair, well, or again nails, skin fragments, yes, that is, scraps of forced underwear. And, of course, ritual work is already underway with all this. I had an episode. They sent me, you know, a photo and a napkin with the remnants of the seed for the ritual in Boxbury. But this energy binding is the only one that took place, of course. That is, there is any energy binding that carries that structured identity of this person.
And what results can be achieved? Is there a guarantee of the result?
Look, everything about the results, it all depends on the goals, right? Initially, any effectiveness of any work and the probability of success, it is determined on a preliminary diagnosis. That is, the deck is pre-laid out and firm, there it is already possible to summarize for yourself how much use there is to take up work or not to take up. I, in turn, take the cases I undertake quite seriously. And, of course, I always take on only the work that really has the opportunity to change in favor of what a person treats, respectively.
Is it possible to give any guarantees at all?
Well, look, in this case it will be most objective and fair to note that the master can only give a guarantee that he really performs the ritual. Absolutely, yes. That is, speaking about it, at the same time, again based on the preliminary diagnosis. It is possible to determine the probability of the effectiveness of a particular ritual, right? That is, as the probability of effectiveness can be very good, it can also be, of course, very bad. And any decent master will certainly tell about it right away. That is, from the diagnosis, it is immediately summarized, either there are chances, or there are no chances at all. Yes, or the chances are such for success. This is the first thing that can be said. I can immediately note that only charlatans and scammers always give 100% guarantees of the result. You have to remember that, right? That is, here it is first of all important for the applicant to understand for himself. Either he is ready to hear the situation as it really looks, and for himself, again, yes, to accept it. Or again he buys for his money exactly what he wants to hear. That is, nothing more or less. Absolutely any ritual has both a probability of success and a probability of failure. In other words, there is such a term as higher forces, lower forces refused for one reason or another, or, let's say, Someone and the same customer or object of the ritual begins to make some number of mistakes, right? That is, suppose, if this is a love spell, then, of course, the object of the ritual gets in touch with the customer. The customer begins to pour out old insults, claims, yes, and in general, of course. The ritual object turns away from him again. That is, of course, in this case, it is pointless to emphasize that your magic does not work. Why? Because a person has been let down to you. You again, as they say, in general, missed everything. But here again, it is necessary to understand, yes, that is, how the magical is realized in our physical world. And the ways of this realization are not known for sure to anyone. That is, if, of course, a person, let's say, comes to me purposefully for a ritual, I, of course, am primarily responsible not so much for the result that the person is alive and well, everything is fine with him. Of course, if a person begins to perform a ritual on his own, then it would be foolish to deny that he has a certain set of risks. Again, a set of risks. This, by the way, also applies to those who are looking for a love spell at home very often on the web. It is worth noting, of course, that no master ever reveals his secrets, especially publicly. That is, a love spell at home, yes, as if I'm not engaged in patronage, so that I can sit on some forums there to merge my technique. Yes, what I do, how I do it. Everyone has their own professional secrets, of course, I also have them. And, of course, free and useful advice is useless advice. That is, of course, it will be possible. I periodically look at forums like this again, yes, what people write for general development. But in principle, there, let's say, even if the stipulation is drawn up more or less correctly, yes. Then some words are rearranged, and, if you think about it, they radically change the meaning. Of course. That is, very often those who come, having the experience of a love spell at home, for me it is, in fact, the best client. Because he does not come with one problem, but with two. That is, the first one is, of course, some kind of negative that he needs to remove already, which he acquired himself by performing this or that ritual. And, of course, when this negative has already been removed, he still needs exactly the same ritual of love magic, which he still needs to perform. Could you tell us more about such an important part as diagnostics? So you're saying you do diagnostics using tarot cards? Diagnosis? Yes, on the tarot deck, diagnosis of manure. In other words, these are two main tools, of course, due to which it is possible to understand the true cause, the true situation, and determine what can be changed in the current situation. And can you reveal exactly how you work with a tarot deck and with the same wax? Well, look, the tarot deck, in principle, it again requires some experience. Moreover, my tarot deck is unconventional, unlike the general understanding of tarot. I work from the second spindle, and this deck is more intuitive, yes, that is, in principle, again. There are 78 cards in the deck, and in a combination of certain arcana, again. You can understand what the situation looks like, you can again understand in one or another scenario how it can be changed. What is the possible outcome of this situation? What pitfalls can there be, or what can form in the process of complexity? And of course, if the applicant is lying, the deck will certainly tell about it. It is worth noting here that, of course, the most basic thing is not the knowledge that is given theoretically, but those that have been gained in practice. That is, of course, if a master has a connection with the egregor with which he interacts, he has absolutely any undertaking, yes. It is in this craft, it will be given to him easily and naturally. If, accordingly, the master does not have this connection, and he, of course, as it were, yes, that is, he received some knowledge, received some basic information, and, accordingly, stopped there. Without communication with the egregor, of course, his work will not move further. And the connection is being worked out for quite a long time. That is, in my case it took 2 years. In other words, 2 years are intensive ritual work. Could you describe this connection with egregor, as you call it? Yes. What is it? How does the information come in? In what form do you perceive it? Interaction occurs, of course, in ritual work, yes, again. That is, there is work going on here, again, either on the western side of the cathedral, of course, yes, or this again. If the churchyard land, that is, it is in the churchyard, not in the cemetery, how does our churchyard differ from the cemetery? A cemetery is just a burial plot. A churchyard is the same cemetery where the chapel stands. So here, of course, the altar is the same, right? Candles are lit, photos of the customer are placed, photos of the object or victim of the ritual are placed, and, of course, the ritual is already being performed. In other words, the ritual consists of several stages. This is again the prizes of one or another entity with which interaction is expected, a contract. And by itself the completion of the ritual sacrifice payback. Yes. That is, exactly here is a certain algorithm of actions, a certain sequence of them, a certain observance of those rules, norms. Again, it of course, gives one or another effectiveness.
They also said rules and regulations. But are there any consequences? Can there be any? Well, what else to call ricochets? Yes, after rituals, that is, for customers.
It is worth noting here, of course, that one way or another, revenge from higher and lower forces is certainly inevitable. But here it is a very important point that if the master, the one who undertakes to perform this or that ritual, he of course knows how to take away the binary rollback, and that he, again, the master, yes, or his turned or the object of the ritual was nothing. It all comes with time, it all comes. Again, some basics come during training. And the result is that, yes, there really are techniques to get what you want absolutely, in general, with impunity. With impunity from higher or lower forces again. You know, it's an energy equivalent exchange, right? That is, the same lower forces gotta pay off, right? Of course, one way or another, having accepted something, they gave something.
And then what is brought?
A sacrifice.
Yes.
It is sacrificed. You know, there again, depending on the technique, a lot of things are brought. Chickens again, right? That is, it is usually a bird. That is, how in a certain period of time, there a certain subculture, calling itself Satanists, cut cats in the cemetery. This is, of course, nonsense. Because a cat is not a sacrificial animal, and dogs are not a sacrificial animal either. It is the sacrificial animal, that is the bird, of course. Is a bird, is a ram again, yes, the same. But this is if we take other cults.
In other words, it turns out that a sacrifice in the form of a bird is enough for the spirit to give something that.
In some cases, the master can use the same spirit of places and give his blood. Absolutely, yes. In other words, this is a very important aspect in relation to the fact that you understand. The spirits of the place do not eat meat as such. This broiler carcass is of no interest to them. And if we take more specifically how this mechanism happens, yes, interactions. That is, of course, when you brought a chicken to the cemetery there and cut off its head, let's say, yes. Then the energy on the last exhalation that this chicken emits is, of course, food. That is, all the inhabitants of the subtle world, they, of course, feed only on energy. That is, of course, in the same case, when the master gives a sacrifice with his blood, he gives a piece of his energy, of course, which the spirits of places will not rest, or the demons, of course, gratefully accept.
Why do cats and dogs not release this energy?
You know, there is a certain division here. But suppose a person does not eat predators, yes, again. That is, a person eats only carnivores. That is, there are, as it were, certain details, features, yes, why is this happening? Well, because meat is unsuitable, yes, again. It's the same here. It is difficult to say where it came from, and where it got its start, but nevertheless, regardless of territorial features. That is, in the same cult, water is usually sacrificed to a chicken. Very often, right?
A certain tradition turns out.
A kind of tradition. But the water, again, is still worth noting. Again, if this is a Haitian tradition, it sometimes sacrifices people there. Because there is a certain reservation, yes, located in Haiti, which today practices cannibalism. And for them, of course, it does not matter, yes, how to eat someone, again, yes, how to sacrifice a neighbor, or sacrifice him. Well, I'm talking so figuratively, you understand, right? That is, in general, as if yes, traditionally it is, of course, a chicken that does not sacrifice. It's the same here. That is, there is not the fact of the presence of the sacrificial animal itself. but the fact of the energy that the sacrificial animal releases when the ritual of its offering is performed by itself.
As for the energy of the person who orders the ritual, is there any energy taken from him?
Not from him. Not from him. In other words, everything that is necessary is done by the master.
Do you have any preparation for the rituals? Well, that is now even just in terms of I don't know. Well, here you are going to do something. You have, let's say you can't eat in the morning, for example. Well, for example, yes, that is, in everyday life there are some there.
Rituals. There are rituals that require certain fasts, of course it is present. And there are a lot of features. Each preparation for the ritual, it goes individually. Even the same candles are not bought in a certain amount of packaging, right? As it is in the church there lies, yes, there are 5 boxes of candles there centuries for sale. Here it is always advisable to buy the same wax candles for a specific job.
That is, at first you had.
I won't tell you that. It's tie. It's a sacrament.
And so, what are you refusing?
Yes, it certainly happens. It happens. First of all, I do not work with people under the age of 18. This is strictly yes. And also, if I understand that a person is clearly inadequate, I have every right to refuse him. I refuse him. Tell me, do people turn to you who, perhaps, feel the influence of some dark entities, so-called settlers? Yes, of course, it is destructive. There are much fewer of them, of course, than in the aspect of love magic. Well, yes, these are primarily negative programs. These are generic negative programs, or, again, nekidney, yes, that is. There are 2 variants of spoilage there. Either it is generic, like a generic curse, yes, which comes out there either at some period of life, or it does not come out at all, and only takes place in the next generation, or it is again, of course, some kind of captive damage, curses. That is, there are a lot of variations. There are evil eyes, again. Any destructive program. These programs, can they be equated to weights? No. Is it the same as the programs? No, no, no. Everything that is destructive, is, of course, the consequences of this or that work. That is, of course, if a person at the same intersection of shoulder straps sees that there is something under his feet with this there. Yes, whatever it is, a 100-ruble bill or a gold earring, then, of course, it is worth noting that it was not by chance that she was there. It wasn't someone who lost it, it was left there, and it was left purposefully. It can also be a crossbar, that is, the same diseases, again, yes, the same crossbar of lack of money, some troubles. The same crossbar of damage, of course. And it's not an egregor, you know, right? This is exactly what the information carrier is. In other words, this thing carries a certain program, certain information. That is, if this is a program for lack of money, of course, a person then begins to have some difficulties. And how does this program work? Is it embedded in consciousness? You see, when a thing that is picked up at the same cemetery intersection has found a new owner, its program is integrated into the human energy field, and he is already a carrier of this program in one way or another. This is just the same destructive. Destructive, as well as damage from the eye, they are, of course, diagnosed on a preliminary diagnosis, yes, as if on the same tarot deck. And if there is any negative impact, of course, it is removed.
Were you talking about settlers? That is, about a destructive that can be caught somewhere when someone shifts it?
You need to catch it yourself.
And how can you catch it yourself?
Well, let's say there are simple rules, again, yes. Visiting the same cemetery, yes, let's assume. That is, when leaving the cemetery, it is highly not recommended to turn around. By doing so, you give permission to the restless to follow you. And behind your back, behind your shoulders, you can, of course, bring yourself a gift.
It's just that there are still terms like succubi and incubi that, well, I mean, there's a certain terminology, right? That is, they come at night to men, to women. That is, they are again entities that feed on sexual energy. Yes, as is commonly believed. That is, have you ever had in practice? Have you encountered such requests there, let's say, from people, to evict a certain succubus or incubus there?
It's called succubi incubi somewhere, right? Somewhere again it's called podsilency, right? That is, a restless entity. Again, if a person is hanging out, then of course, yes, of course. This is primarily a destructive program, which, of course, requires intervention. It must be removed. With what do you shoot this program? Virtual equipment. Is this a virtual technique? This is a new program being turned on, or are you asking for help from other entities, the same demons? Of course it is. They help. Absolutely any craft that goes within the framework of cathedral witchcraft is all work with demons, regardless of what is required. That is, to call it, let's say, radical black magic, well, it's much more correct. Probably it has a neutral shade. Yes. Why? Because, besides how it can harm, it can help her. That is, take, let's say, a kitchen table. They can first of all cut off the edge of bread and feed the hungry, or you can kill a neighbor, yes. Here, of course, the work goes one way or another through the demonic pantheon. And, of course, there is, yes, ritual work being carried out to remove the negative program, regardless of what it is caused by. Yes, again, from the eyes it was damage or, again, a generic curse in the active phase.
But it is removed, spoilage, that is again, it can then go to someone else. So it's still some kind of energy that is present in our world.
Of course. There is a lot of energy in our world in general. That is, if we take them as it were, the only thing is that, of course, the techniques are different, yes. And they look different for everyone and are called differently. And so, of course, our world interacts very closely with the subtle world. And, of course, yes, that is, there is a lot of energy around us.
Have you ever had it happen that people come with a request? That is, they are damaged, and again the influence of a certain magician or sorcerer with whom you could not cope. Yes, that is, perhaps you understand that someone's magic is stronger there. Is it possible?
Look, no. No. Why? Because there are two ways out of the situation here. Yes, that is, either this problem is partially solved, in the largest part. Yes. Perhaps there will be something to worry about, but only slightly, yes. That is, the lion's share of this trouble again, it is removed by ritual work. At the same time, it is worth noting that there is again a cross-magical effect. That is, of course, if some kind of ritual work is constantly going on with respect to this or that person. They constantly add something to him, bring, as they say, yes, as a gift, then of course. Here you can clean it for a very long time. That is, any cross-magical effect, it implies trouble for more than one appeal, as a rule.
So it turns out to be a kind of battle of magicians.
It turns out, yes. But the cross-magical effect is a rather unfortunate feature, that is, as a rule, it has isolated cases in general practice. Do you think there are people who are not affected by magic, that is, against whom it is impossible, magic does not work? Well, how can I tell you, everyone is absolutely susceptible. There's just a different approach to everyone, yes, again. In other words, how can a person not be affected? First of all, a person has an energy field, right? If a certain program is built into this energy field, then no matter how fast it is, again, yes, it will begin to affect. In other words, there are a lot of factors there. This is again the same generic protection. How strong is she, right? That is, as it is, absolutely. A ritual, a perfect ritual, is by itself a certain program that is embedded in the energy field. And if this program is built in, then what it carries, of course, it will be displayed on a person's consciousness, of course, on his further fate. Then the question is, can a person attract to himself some, well, let's say, negative programs? It's enough to pick up something in the cemetery, right? That is, there is a certain, such a feature, that even if something fell out of your pocket in the cemetery, yes, it's not even worth picking it up. You will be richer by more, because it means that you bought off in this way. They took away, let's say, not health, not more than something large, they took away this particular thing, right? And so, of course, there are a lot of features that entail a certain string of consequences. Yes, both positive and negative. It's not for nothing that there are certain unwritten, unspoken rules, in one or another trend, yes, again, national, ethnic, again. Yes. Well, at the rite of farewell to the deceased, again, at birth. This is all taken primarily from history, from ethnic characteristics. They carry with them not only, again, certain signs of any kind, but also, of course, a certain wisdom. Could you describe in your own words what magic is in general? Magic. Well, you know, if we talk more like this, constructively, then of course, the craft itself, which relates to magic, is probably the mastery of energy management. In other words, everything is energy. The same, again, cemetery is a place of power, it has its own energy. The cathedral is the same there, or the church is also a place of power, there is its own energy. In other words, the master directs this energy in the direction that he needs, due to the energy with which it interacts. Vladimir, you call yourself a master warlock. Could you tell our viewers, decipher this term warlock, what is its essence? Well, look, it's really quite simple here. First of all, if we take initially where this terminology came from, then it is quite understandable. In Christianity, in early Christianity, any book other than Scripture was considered a black book. In other words, remember, yes, in the Inquisition, what happened with scientists, yes, who again came up with something there. New laws of physics, discoveries in chemistry, in astronomy, yes, they were subjected to the Inquisition. In other words, why was this happening? Because all of their works for the first time, of course, first of all had the term warlock. If we consider the warlock in the aspect of magic, then everything is much simpler here. This, of course, is a sacrament, certain knowledge of this sacrament, knowledge of ritual techniques, that help the master in his craft.
I would like to know maybe in more detail about the many attributes that are on your table. Any of the most interesting ones, that is, what are they for?
First of all, of course, it is worth noting, of course, this is the altar. The altar, of course, is made of a tombstone on the reverse side, that is, there was once a temporary tombstone. Then it turned out to be in the garbage of the cemetery, and of course it was useful to me. This is again a lot of different black icons with demonic faces. And of course, each demonic face protects in one or another need, depending on the purpose of the convert. And here is this coffin, and it carries some kind of skeletons. Well, specifically this one, of course not. It's just a box, yes, again, where the applicant can put his gratitude to them. But the coffin that stands next to it, yes, indeed, it already carries a certain ritual load. Well, that is so that you understand, yes, again, the same voodoo doll in practice, yes, this is again called Volt. In the Russian Black Book. This is a figure of a person who, after performing the ritual, is named. It is made of wax candles. In this case, the player serves as a place of destruction, yes, that is, the Volt figurine fits safely into the coffin. And, of course, then it is sprinkled with homemade earth. Is this some kind of negative? Yes, of course, this is just the same thing as the settlement of the essence, it is destructive, it is spoilage. By the way, here, do you fulfill such orders? Do you perform spoilage? And now, we will unite with you the feeling of believers. You know, I have a spectrum of what the applicant comes with, the applicant is very large. Yes, of course, people come with similar needs. That is, you see, here again everything is most likely built on justice, because that's exactly how the devil worship itself. Yes, let's call it Satanism, it certainly has the dogma of justice. In other words, this is a certain underside of the same Christianity, that teaches to turn the cheeks, let's assume. The Satanic Bible has a clear vision for this. If you were hit on one cheek with the offender's caviar in his other cheek, that's fair enough. Can you tell us more about the Satanic Bible? Yes, of course. First of all, of course, I wrote it, or rather I didn't write it, most likely I generalized it. Anton Chandler Love is an American Satanist. He summarized all the concepts, created the first Church of Satan in the USA, and registered it. In other words, this pentagram, yes, is that the most common symbol that we are used to seeing, it is, of course, a registered symbol of the Church of Satan in the USA. And just generalizing the general terms, yes, that is, of course. This cult existed on different continents, in different cultures, even before lava. The genders in their church simply generalized it. In other words, he summarized certain dogmas and, of course, published his book. Yes, that is, he has, of course, already designated it as the Satanic Bible. Black Leagues, what is it? Where did these icons come from? You can call them that probably, right? And who is depicted on them? But first of all, black icons always depict the faces of princes, and, of course, demons in the first place. This is the reverse side of the same Christianity, of course. And, of course, it is in this game that the masters of cathedral witchcraft work.
And their purpose, in principle, is similar to icons.
It has a reverse side in the same Gregory Christianity. In other words, let's assume that the same Holy Trinity among Christians has an icon of the Black Trinity in the Vretnichestvo. Nicola to the miracle worker of Christians, for warlocks it is Church Besbury. That is, the same Mother of God with a child, yes, in her arms. Here it goes without saying that the radiant is the Mother of God, that is, it is the antipod. The downside, of course. Also, respectively, for Christians, the Savior, for Veretnikov is Satan, the Prince of Demons. Like the Archangel Michael of Christians, of course, the Veretnikov is the Black Michael. In other words, everything is exactly the opposite. Anton, he is very big. In our time, and according to the needs that each master faces, it certainly turns out that we have the Prince of Demons, Satan. It's in the upper left corner, right. Then we have the Black Trinity. The Black Trinity is our analog of the Holy Trinity, only the antipod, of course. Then it goes without the Mahaba. This, of course, is the patron of wealth, prosperity, greed and greed. That is, all rituals that are related to well-being, of course, they primarily occur through the Prince of Mafa. Then we have the all-seeing eye of the devil. This is the main icon, right? Why is it small? Because it is always convenient to take it with you again. That is, you can put it in your pocket, go to the churchyard with it, go to some collection with it, and it is handy. Then there is the death of Iridianus Besperzets, and Na without lust.
A black mirror.
Yes, it's a black mirror. This is a thing that is used as a focus, that is, energy is focused on it.
There's another wooden figure there.
Is that what you mean? And this is an altar statuette, this is Satan.
I read it.
We just know that in Christianity, for example, icons, they are written, yes, on the basis of some people who have been recognized as saints and are depicted on icons. I would like to understand, here on the black icons, who is depicted after all. But if we consider what is written in Scripture, yes, again, that is, the same Satan was still a resident of the upper world. Before he became a resident of the lower world, that is, he was expelled again, yes, of course, along with those who joined him. That is, initially, these faces were taken from this analogy, of course, and this dogma was taken. In other words, human history, it goes back more than 1 millennium, it had a lot of techniques in this direction, a lot of cults. And for the whole history of today, of course, we, of course, have that pantheon of demons, which is the reverse side. The underside, the antipod.
You started talking about hierarchy. And could you reveal this question in a little more detail? That is, by whom this hierarchy was introduced, let's say, how it exists in this subtle plane, that is, who is at the top of this chain, who is at the bottom. In other words, here is a more detailed question, if you can, please.
At the head of the hierarchy is, of course, the devil. This, if we take the reverse side, yes, that is, at the head of the hierarchy of Christian Tober. The devil of fans is the devil, of course. In other words, it is a kind of higher power, a higher mind. That is, of course, the icon of the same name is the all-seeing eye of devils. It symbolizes the crossroads of the worlds, in the middle of which there is, of course, an eye, yes. An eye that is all-seeing and all-hearing. This, of course, is a higher power. Now, could you say what this power needs from a person? Look, it's difficult to say specifically from a person, because it's worth noting here that a person is a driven executor of one or another will. Yes, that is, if we take the same Christianity, then in the scriptures we find that man is a servant of God. Here, of course, it is worth noting that there are no slaves in the reverse side. Devils serve according to their personal will. This is a conscious choice. That is, he doesn't need slaves. Well, look, in fact, it is the devil's worship that is the basis, as if we take a dogma, then, of course, it is to descend to the throne of heaven. Yes, how would it be? What is it called? Again, in black prayers, in black prayers. But today, in principle, in my opinion, it is quite objectively possible to judge that this has already happened. Yes, that is, most of the inhabitants of the modern world, they are subject to certain sins, weaknesses, yes. Accordingly, the same church, you probably see perfectly well yourself, we watch all the news, they serve far from wearing a shirt, right? Yachts, expensive cars, luxury goods, of course, right. So the golden domes go to stand beggars, right. A torn shirt with an outstretched hand. That is, there is, of course, no justice here. If Christ drove the merchants out of the temples, today there is a brisk trade going on in the temples. That is, what is called donations. Yes, of course you will be sold for exactly the price that you see on the price tag. Of course, this is a trade. Again, the same acquisitiveness, greed, yes, also takes place. And, of course, it is worth noting that not all of the parishioners come there with pure thoughts. That is, there is a cross on the chest and a zero in the soul. Everyone has heard such a saying, yes, that the devil needs a human soul. And that's when a contract is signed. Allegedly a person sells his soul to the devil. Could you explain it somehow, as you understand it and as your tradition understands it, for example? But you know, in this case, one way or another, the imperishable soul goes somewhere. And on the path of life, making a life path, that is, living here now in this world. It is worth noting that according to the Holy Scripture, even for one sin you will certainly go to hell. I am of the opinion that it prevents me from sinning very many times and getting into the hell of legend. It is worth remembering, of course, that what for me is mainly worshipping the devil, working with demons. Why? Because usually God feeds his pasta with promises, and the devil, of course, in cash. In other words, we must remember this. And everyone chooses the path for himself, whether he needs it or not, right? Here it is an individual matter, and, of course, everyone's business.
Well, you were just talking about the very conscious choice, that is, which you basically consider.
It is also worth remembering here why I do not take persons under the age of 18. First of all, this is still the ethical side, yes, and on the other hand, of course, a person who comes for this or that appeal, or in the key of this or that appeal, he must still be socially mature and make this or that choice consciously. Because everything that is a magical craft, everything that is built into a person's energy field, it certainly causes an irreversible imprint in the future, changes his fate. Therefore, of course, the choice must be conscious.
How can mom reach the higher ones? In which case is it necessary? That is, for what kind of rituals, maybe? It is necessary to turn to the higher powers. Well, that is, according to the hierarchy. Yes, I mean.
You see, any sorcerer, again, when he conducts a ritual, he understands perfectly for himself, yes, that is, it is to whom exactly there will be an appeal, to the face of some black icon, yes, to one or another entity. That is, in this case, it is the verity of the censor on the book. There are certain glitches even, yes. That's the whole pantheon of demons. That is, of course, if, let's say, the master plans to work with Abara, the church demon of Abara, then, of course, He forms for himself the necessary things that he needs for the ritual. If he works by himself with the same death, with the princely death, then he also selects everything necessary for himself. Yes, that is, it's like everyone without, every prince, he patronizes this or that message, this or that desire, yes. Let's assume the same prince of Mafao, he patronizes well-being.
And the sorcerer mom needs to get some kind of permits so that he can turn to different spirits here.
Egregor, probably, yes, after all. That is, such an energy flow. Here, of course, it must be understood that, first of all, a connection is not needed for a particular entity. A connection is needed with this egregor in general. That is, by and large, the Veretniks work in the same gregor as the Christian priests. That is, they are on the same wavelength. Only these on the light side, those on the dark side. And, of course, if the master has developed this energy connection with this egregor, then, of course, he can already realize the desired of one or another in one way or another.
Is there a career paper?
Well, how can I tell you? This is an interesting question, of course. Here, in fact, I will say so. In other words, you can hone your skills all your life, and you can learn all your life. That is, there is a certain minimum, yes, of course, if the master practices and already understands for himself. That one thing is given to him well, and he is doing exactly that. That is, it is given to him, let's say, love magic is good, he begins to take love spells into work, yes, as if there again. For a certain flow, even by itself, it is given to him to work with the destructive there, with the removal of negativity. Yes, the removal of negative programs. He takes it on. That is, only in this key. And so, in fact, this craft implies that live and learn forever. That is, one way or another, to tread on the spot, not to dig up new things, if this new one appears available. But it would, of course, be stupid and unreasonable. Can a person somehow take some actions himself, protective measures to protect himself from the influence of, well, let's say, third forces? Well, look, again, do not make any mistakes, he can protect himself, you know, there is no such ritual. That was a straight reinforced concrete shield from any adversity. Yes, that is, the same amulets, talismans, which a lot of people actively sell, again, yes. As if from masters on their forms. But you understand, yes, what an amulet or talisman will do if the master has photos, a bunch of hair. The maximum is the maximum that will happen, yes, that is, there will be a blow, but it will be a little softer. But it will be inevitable.
It turns out that a person, when he wants to do something with magic, and at the same time, when he wants to protect himself from it, that is, he enters into this magical game, roughly speaking, already at the moment when he thought about it, it doesn't matter if he wants to use magic or protect himself from it.
Well, what can I tell you? Here on this score, again, we can find a lot in the Holy Scriptures where the phrase "the will of the Almighty" is very often repeated, right? That is, if a person is destined to accept a painful death, then this is his will. In any case, if a person substitutes fate, one way or another, yes, using certain amulets, of course. This is condemned by religion. Moreover, it is condemned by absolutely any religion. In other words, there is a certain competition in religion, yes, that is, to take absolutely any current. Absolutely any current, it condemns any appeal to any other current, except this one. In other words, it's like copyright, yes, it turns out. Any minister of a cult, of any current, so to speak, he of course, always tells his flock, don't go anywhere except here. And the church in this case, it treats with great censure precisely the moment when one or another parishioner resorted to anything. That is, of course, there is a clear vision in Christianity. The best amulet is a cross.
Can entities test a magician?
Of course, especially in the early stages, when the master only takes the first steps. In the stages of his formation after training, there will certainly be some kind of drawdown, there will be some kind of blow. That is, something will tempt the master. First of all, his fate will tempt him to act or act. Change that plus to minus. Yes, to leave the current to which he, in general, joined the service. This will of course be the case to a greater and lesser extent. It could be some kind of significant loss, and material, let's say, right? But nevertheless, yes, this can happen at first, at the first stages.
Can entities influence you? That is, outside of rituals. That is, when you, roughly speaking, do not call them. That is, they themselves can somehow come to you without authorization. Knock.
Of course they can, and it absolutely always happens for a number of reasons that certain lower entities are trying to either say something, or convey something, or warn, of course. That is, it is being done for something. In other words, it has a specific purpose to convey something, say something, make something clear, perhaps point out some mistakes. That is, it is so this harmonious relationship of energy exchange with the lower world, yes, that it always has an interaction. Right? Between the master and the forces he serves.
Does it all happen to you continuously?
Of course, of course. He is a master, you see, and that's why he is a master, because he is constantly in these energies, respectively. That is, the fact that at first it may surprise a specialist that, let's say, his craft is tiring, in fact it's not fatigue. Tirelessness, it's just an intense energy exchange to which a person is not used.
What is the benefit of the subtle plan, or the invisible world, to help people on Earth, for example? That is, well, the person makes a deal. He comes, for example, to you for a certain ritual. Yes, he has a certain request. Why is this to the invisible world? What does he get from a person?
It is worth noting that, of course, absolutely any trend, any religious trend, it requires again its ministers, its followers. That is, one paste goes out and resorts to one light, yes, another paste resorts to dark, yes. That is, the fact of service takes place. And the service is not only out of some kind of material, yes, views, that is, the performance of certain rituals, for some kind of monetary reward. And this is again, and first of all, a ritual work for yourself. The master conducts a lot of rituals for himself. That is, if we take the same 12 spells of Ed, if we look into it in more detail, yes. Then in principle a lot is being done in general, yes, as if for this cult. So that this cult is replenished and fed with energy.
Again, energy exchange.
Aye, of course.
Are you acting as a kind of intermediary between people here?
Of course.
Intense creatures.
Of course, of course. By and large, this is mediation. That is, a person comes for this or that request, yes, with this or that expression of will, the master is, of course, an intermediary between the applicants and the forces with which he interacts. Here it is worth noting again, yes, why no decent master will ever give an absolute guarantee of the result to the client. That is, the person who applied for this or that ritual comes, yes, and again emphasizes. Can you promise me a guarantee of the ritual? Yes. Of course not. I'll explain why. Because the master is the conductor of this buffer zone between the converted and the forces with which he interacts. And to decide for the forces with which the master interacts, but this, of course, is groundless and illogical. Gives not the master. The one who applies is given the benefit, for which he came not by the master, but by the forces with which he interacts.
What do Libra, perfume, well, or what else can they be called there? Yes, that is, after all, they need money, they need energy.
Energy. Does the master give energy by making a sacrifice during the ritual? Of course, it is during the performance of the ritual that the master spills out his energy and again makes a sacrifice. Makes a payback. In other words, it is, of course, energy exchange. There is an energy exchange, and due to this, of course, these inhabitants of the lower world feed on energy, feed on it constantly. A person who turns to a sorcerer, to a black magician, he does not make a deal at the moment of conversion, but makes it at the moment when he just thought about it and started looking for a specialist who will solve his problem. Everything materializes here. That is, one energy message, yes, when a person does not agree with the course of his fate, yes, with the decision of fate, with the decision of what fate was preparing for him. Why do we again have a lot of Orthodox priests, including, very much like to emphasize, do not go to magicians. Do not go to sorcerers. Yes, at the same time, of course, people willingly go to them. Yes, why? Because as soon as a person begins to think about it, to look for a performer, yes, the deal happens at that very moment. And not at the moment when the master is already doing the ritual work. This should also be remembered. Hello. Shadow control is on the air. Every person in his life repeatedly encounters magic and what is inexplicable. And when faced with this, he often forgets, although the consequence remains. And the question is, what is magic? False or true? Magic exists and it's real. If magic was a fantasy or a deception, it wouldn't have existed for so many thousands of years. And throughout all this time, it has seduced and seduces the masses of people to this day. Magic is the oldest and most numerous religion, the religion of Satan, whose adherents are even atheists. That is why all the prophets at all times said about the inadmissibility of practicing magic, that magic does not lead to hell. And yet, some religions, originally built on the true teachings introduced by the prophets, today openly engage in magic, conduct various magical rituals, offerings, sacrifices. But after all, the prophets did not do this and, moreover, bequeathed not to do it. All these actions are imposed by the devil. Just like begging. Allegedly, God has material goods and health. But the prophets said, it is not worth asking God for anything, except for the salvation of the soul. It turns out that those who had to fight and resist magic openly serve Satan. Why is she so attractive? When people, knowing about the ruinousness, and, nevertheless, exchange the eternal for the momentary, ghostly material. Yes, the invisible world exists, and it is diverse, like the ocean is full of unknown life. And together with you, friends, we would like to understand a little bit about what magic really is, why it is so tempting, and how the invisible world really works.